dive deep into the topics that directly impact the evolving originator. I'm your host, Connor Bartley. Bam! And joining me today is a really interesting guy who has a well rounded, pretty much done it all background in mortgage. Recently elected to the role of MBA president in the state of Kentucky, and now a new member to the lower team as regional manager. Jason Heflin, welcome to the Lowdown.
Thanks, Connor. It's a honor and pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, Jason. I know you're going to bring a ton of value to the show and to the audience and really just help these evolving originators that are listening today kind of get the information that they need to kind of get from point A to point B in their career and things of that nature. Before we kind of start diving into those things, I'd love to give people that are listening some context on who you are and what your journey has been in the mortgage industry. I know you've been doing it for a long time, but kind of help us understand how you got into the business, how things have gotten started for you, and kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think my story is a testament that, if you just put the work and time in, you don't have to have a finance degree necessarily to be a good originator. So my story started, it's very interesting. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and my mother was vice president of a mortgage company. Back when a vice president meant something, they grew from 3 or 4 people in a house to, when she left 20 years later, several hundred employees. They were a top three lender in Georgia. This is back in the 80s. It was a mortgage company that was owned by a builder. And they were slapping up homes in Atlanta like crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, all I remember as a kid is I would go in the summers and help box up files. And for my mother was, when she was having a bad day, was, don't ever get in this business. And I was like, okay. And so what did I go do at 25 when I was kind of, trying to find myself? I was in and out of going to college, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was actually studying criminal justice. Thought I was going to be a police officer. And next thing you know, brother-in-law to be that I had gotten to know, we became close, approached me and said, "Hey, I own a mortgage brokerage. You'd be great at this. You should join me and get in the business, and I'll mentor you." But it's in Kentucky. And I was like, I don't know about that. But after a little bit, convinced me, and literally we sold everything, packed up, and moved to Kentucky in a U-Haul. And the next day I was going into a broker shop, and basically, here's the phone book, start calling.
Wow.
So yeah, that was my intro.
Yeah, man. So what was the interest in criminal justice? Because that's really interesting. Like, why was that something that you were pursuing at the time?
I just, I've always, thought that would be, exciting, something, a job that actually means something. That's what I've always tried to want to do. I didn't want to just do a job just to work. I wanted to, mean something, feel good, give back, what have you. And I had a couple friends in Atlanta that were going down that route. And, I was young and it sounded exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Drive fast and have a gun, right?
Right. But I will tell you, it's interesting. I actually applied at a county suburb of Atlanta, Gwinnett County, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, there was almost 400 or 500 applicants at the time for like 30 positions.
Yeah.
It was a different time, and Atlanta
Yeah,
was
let's say it's the opposite now,
right.
right?
Exactly. Atlanta was booming, and so I made it. I made the cut down to the final 50, and so I think after that I was like, I wasn't sure if I was going to go through that again, and that's when the mortgage opportunity fell in my lap.
Yeah.
And my wife at the time and I looked at each other and we were like, we grew up in Atlanta. We watched it grow from a mid-sized town to a mega town, and we were ready to make a change. So moved to Kentucky and went into business with this fella, and that's a whole nother story. But I ended up being the owner of
I gotcha.
and the broker of record.
So when growing up so close to the mortgage industry, having a front row seat to your mom doing it and everything that was going on, and her comments about don't ever get into this business, like was that was what were your impressions on mortgage as a young man just kind of growing up and around all?
Sure, sure. I mean, it was, it was intimidating, some just I can remember hearing the terminology and the struggles and, dealing with HUD and FHA. And, my mom was putting together packages for Jenny Mae. And so, it was very intimidating. And I remember when I finally got into the business, I was like, wow, I really knew nothing. I heard my mom saying a lot of things, but I had no idea really what that was all about. But I do think it helped me slightly, maybe pick up quicker on,
Sure.
just the terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get into the business, you're working with your brother-in-law to be, you guys are doing, when was there a moment where the switch flipped and you said, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I really enjoy it. And what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, it was probably in that first year. I think ultimately what I remember is so we got our broker's license, or I got my broker's license. So basically started a new company like a month after I moved to Kentucky. And he was going to mentor me, what have you. But he also was originating, and we started doing some cold calling. And this is back when rates were dropping, and this is late '90s. And I remember when I closed the first loan out of the two of us, and I'd maybe been doing it 2 months, I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And that
Yeah.
wasn't that bad. And now, granted, it was, I was doing a lot of conventional refis, so it was, pretty simple. But yeah, that moment when, I closed that first loan, I just, became a sponge and just wanted to know everything, right? And so luckily I had him there. We subsequently went our separate ways pretty quickly, not due to business, but their personal stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up with the company in my lap after a year, well, not even a year, 6 months to 9 months. I owned the company, and he wasn't my partner anymore. So I had to just kind of figure it out on my own.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah. And
Well,
that was, that was back.
sometimes
Go
learn
ahead.
by the
Sorry.
fire, right? Get
100.
thrown into it. So you've been around the block for almost 30 years in this industry. What have been some of the things that really frustrated you as you were growing? Just some of the areas that you said, man, if I could just figure this out, or the roadblocks and challenges that where you felt like there was just a glass ceiling on top of you. And was there anything that you found that made that easier to solve and move forward?
Well, I think with that, that improved over time, a lot to do with the connections I started making, right? I wasn't from Kentucky, so, I was an outsider per se. But I started making a lot of connections by getting involved in, mortgage bankers, the board of realtors, just because I started, figuring out, wait a minute, the refi game is ending. That's what I kind of fell into. I better figure out this purchase game pretty quick. Honestly, I don't think I did a purchase transaction my first maybe year and a half into
Oh,
business. Yeah.
so you were like a brand new LO joining the business in 2020.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Jumped in. Yeah. So, but going back to, what helped, I just, the more connections I made, I just held on to those, and I wasn't afraid to call them and ask for help, or, hey, I don't understand this. What is, I mean, even down to, what's an escrow holdback, or whatever. And I'll be honest with you, one of the gentlemen that helped me the most was my account rep, which is, this is kind of sounds funny, thinking about it, was my account rep at Countrywide.
Okay.
I didn't do a lot of subprime. I did a lot of, A paper, but he took the time to kind of, coach me a little bit.
Yeah.
and it was great. And, you know, I think sometimes in this business, for certain people, it just clicks and makes sense quicker than some other, and for me, luckily, I am not a math major by any means, but it just made sense and clicked. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, but it also sounds like you had the humility and the vulnerability to ask for help when you needed it. And I just find that as a challenge that a lot of people in our industry tend to run into. They're stubborn, they suffer in silence, they won't ask, they
yeah,
want to try to figure it out on their own, or they won't, they hold tight to what they do know, and they almost have this imposter syndrome of I don't want them to know what I don't know. And what's been a common theme, and I don't know if you've been able to listen to any past episodes, but what I've talked about with many of the guests that have joined the Lowdown podcast is they just sort of reached out to people. Like they weren't going to let not knowing something hold them back, and they just went for it. So I love that that seems to be a theme with just about everybody I talk to on here. So you get involved with these groups, and you're out networking, and I mean, we're not in a social media age at this time. We're talking about
right,
the 90s, right? We don't have AOL in our mailboxes at home yet, right? So
right,
this is very belly to belly, face to face, reach out over the phone, and just sort of what people today would call old school.
yep,
But that seems to have continued in your career, obviously, with being elected into as president of the NBA in Kentucky and all of that. Like,
right.
how have you continued to foster those relationships, and what advice would you give an originator today on how to get involved locally with those types of groups and
Sure, sure. You know,
organizations?
unfortunately, and I'm not, there's a lot of great loan officers out there that care about our industry. But there's also, I think, loan officers that I don't necessarily say they don't care. They don't understand maybe what, they're up against, there are industries up against with regulation and legislation and things like that. And I just always felt like, you know, I fell into this business, and and I've been very fortunate and made a lot of money and was successful. Why wouldn't I give back? Why wouldn't I want to protect it? Right. And that's truly what the Mortgage Bankers Association is just trying to do. It's trying to protect and preserve what we do every day. And so when I had the opportunity to get involved and somebody asked me 18, 20 years ago, I walked in the first time to the board meeting intimidated as heck,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
I felt like I was, the third grader in the high school class, but, over time, getting to know everybody, I realized, hey, you know what? Everybody's just learning every day. I say this all the time. I've been doing this business, like you said, 28, 29 years, going on 30. I still look at guidelines every day, right? I don't think anybody in this business can say, I know everything. It's impossible. You got to know how to find the information and know your resources, and, and know how to answer intelligently and finding it right. But, you know, I think, if we all could just understand that, hey, it's a constantly moving target in this business.
Right.
And so you just have to, try to stay open to learning and, keeping up with changes as much as you can.
2023, 22, 23, 24, these last 3 years have been difficult. Like, there's no sugarcoating that. And I think the positive byproduct of that has been, as we've seen, I think statistics have shown there were 350 some odd thousand loan officers in 2021. Today, I've heard as few as 97,000, right? So it's a huge drop off, right? But those that have stayed, I've seen more and more movement toward collaboration, sort of just reaching out to one another, and loan officers really leaning on each other to accelerate their growth and their learning. I mean, together we learn faster, together we grow faster. Even just with the lowdown and the loco groups that we've gotten started, it's been fun to see more and more originators start to join and collaborate and discuss topics that are really affecting their business. And some of them walk in no knowledge at all, just a blank slate. Others have tried and failed things many different ways, and they'll let people know, hey, don't make this mistake, don't do that.
Right.
And then others, are further along the path. And when you can get in a room and just, be a part of that brain trust, come to participate, don't be shy, don't be a
Right.
wallflower, but really just kind of come with that open mind. I see a lot of people really just accelerating in that growth, and it's been inspiring to see. And it makes me, really excited for what the future is for a lot of originators that are taking that step, because you can be stuck and stay stuck, right? Or you can go ask for some help. So, and get in a nice supportive group. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the one thing I can tell you, and not to keep harping on Mortgage Bankers Association, but that is one of the biggest things it has done for me is connected me with, other LOs at other companies that are pretty high functioning. And, even as much as, if there's a deal I can't do and, one of my partners at MBA, I know they can. I mean, that's a great, resource there just for that, having other lenders to lean on to potentially help your clients.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a powerful network to have for sure. So you've been in a leadership role for a number of years. It really sounds like since the very beginning, almost.
Yeah, I took a small break for a couple years after the crash, but that was it.
So what is in your role of leader? How are you helping other originators, or kind of what are you finding is important for you to do in a leadership role in this industry? Because it's difficult,
Yeah,
and so good, strong leaders are really important in what they do.
right. I mean, a couple things. I think one thing I try to do is not overreact when we're faced with a situation, a deal exploding or a condition that, is absolutely absurd according to the loan officer. And, you know, I try to just coach them through, just take a step back, take a deep breath. Let's think about this. A lot of times there's a solution if we collaborate and talk about it versus just, getting upset and overacting. So, that's one thing that I try to, don't overreact too quickly when you get some sort of news or question, you know, on a loan or a file, just, try to be patient and give it some time, and usually it will work out, And then I tell people, just be genuine, and tell your story. I think going back to, I was saying when I walked into that mortgage bankers board meeting for the first time, I was intimidated as heck, but it didn't take long for me to realize, hey, they all get up and put their pants on in the morning just like I do. I don't know why to this day I was intimidated. I was younger, so that could have been it. But, just being open to talking about a situation you're facing with somebody else in business can help you learn all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid to say, hey, man, I made a mistake. Here's what happened. What could have I done differently?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, again, that goes back to that just vulnerability and humility and being willing to put yourself out there and be open to what comes back, right?
Right. Right.
so, um,
Absolutely.
so you're here at Lower now, and welcome. Happy
Thank
to
you.
have you on the
Yes.
team. How how was that process for you, and what are your first impressions? I'm just kind of curious
Sure.
to get a
Sure.
sense of what brought you here to Lower and how things have been going.
Sure. Sure. Well, first of all, I'll say probably just like a lot of people in this business, I hate changing. That's not my
Sure.
intention to do that on a regular basis. I've had to make some changes in my career to circumstances out of my control, such as, the 2007 crash and, and other things. But I was in a situation where my team and I were, having some struggles with our current place of employment. And so At the same time, I had a young loan officer who's with me still. About a year and a half ago, she started talking about this Dustin Owen guy and how much she loved T-Lop and you need to listen to it. And I was like, okay, here's me, the old vet going, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I got sucked in, of course,
Very
and
good. Very
and
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've been to some masterminds and I've been to Momentum Builder in Vegas, so I've run across a mirror too. And but anyways, I started seeing like this past summer, I really respected those guys, and then I saw you went there, and I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on at Lower? All these people they're building this powerhouse team. What in the world? So I just kind of saw that, but just was like, I'll pay attention, see what happens. Well, things at my current employer, like I said, started not going so well, and then one day I get a call from out of the blue, Matt Wagner, good old Wags, who is now with Lower, but we, just like you, all worked together at a previous employer, and Matt and I loved working together. He was a great recruiter for me. We had a great system, and just we really clicked. So he called me, and I was like, wait a minute, you're at Lower too? And so, but the timing was just right, and I was like, actually, I'm thinking about talking to a few places, starting to kick some tires to see what's out there, and I did, but man, it was just Lower was it's all about the direction of the company. What's the focus? What's the goals? What are they? What's their long term plan? That's always something in this business that, at least for me, I have to always try to think about. You can't ever really predict exactly what's going to happen, but I've been in the situation where, like I said, the company shut the doors, overnight. So you're always trying to avoid that. But my point is, everything that they were talking about was, this company is aligning, they're planning for the next 10 to 15 years. They're planning on how to, survive, dominate, and control some of this, market over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's something that I'm totally, interested in and believe in. And, what is the modern loan officer going to look like, in the next few years? Anyway, so all these stars just aligned. And then when I met with Nick and went to Columbus and met with Stitch, who's the head of operations, I mean, it was just, I can't explain it. The culture and the vibe it just clicked for me. I could tell that they were sincere. I've been around long enough where I can try to see, when somebody's blowing smoke. And I just, the direction of the company, what they're, focused on, where they're heading, the team that they're building, I was like, I got to be a part of this. And then on top of that, there were several things here that I didn't have at my previous place that have just been icing on the cake, right?
Right.
So the technology, the products, just I feel here that they trust you to be an originator, right? They trust you to do your job, right? And give you the tools and the products to go do it, right? And that's just refreshing. It was just very refreshing. If you can't tell, I'm super excited, and
Yeah.
I've only been here a week and a half, but I'm chomping at the bit. So
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that. And just, I mean, for anyone who's listening, whether it's Lower or some other company, when you're at that crossroads of realizing that change is a possibility and maybe the better possibility, it's so important to find alignment in where you're going, a place that has a plan for where they want to be, that's aligned with where you want to go, and that you have the people in place that you feel comfortable doing mortgage with. You know, we as an industry get really, especially recruiting, gets so hung up on basis points and value props and all of the things that, sort of make recruiting sound really homogenous. Like it sounds very much like the same thing at a lot of different places, just because the pitch has gotten a little stale and it's a little old.
Right. Right.
It's really user experience is what it boils down to. Recruiter talks about technology. That can mean a lot of different things to different people, and some people have no concept of the technology you're talking about because they don't have it where they are, and until they
Right.
use it they won't know how good it is. So it's really difficult to kind of wrap your brain around all of those things. But when you get in front of the people, when you hear where they want to go, it can really paint a much clearer picture, and that I think is what inspires the next iteration of your business. Is now I'm in that place where I feel good about where I'm doing mortgage, and I'm excited about it, and that's good for you, that's good for your team, that's good for your referral partners, that's good for your clients, and that's good for your community. And so those that's a justifiable move, and I know
Yeah.
moving is hard, but when you can justify it, it makes it a lot easier, I think.
Right. And kind of, I'll say that, that was one of the things I think too that just really hit me was the enthusiasm and message was the same from everybody,
Hmm.
from Dan to Randall to, and so it was just like, okay, I mean, I was like, I've got to be a part of this. It was just, it had all the parts. And the crazy thing is, going back to what you said a minute ago, was none of my decision was based on comp. None. Right.
Right. I mean,
Even though I'm gonna make more money, that had nothing to do with it.
yeah, yeah. That's always a long-term decision anyway, right? When you think in the short term on compensation, you might lose sight of what the long term is. And really, in mortgage and any commission-driven job, compensation is um, your production times your comp plan. So if your production is lower than it was before, based off of where you go, then your comp plan really doesn't matter. So
Exactly.
anyway, but I'll tell you, man, we just from the conversation, you and I, this is the first time we've ever talked.
Right.
For anyone listening, this is the first time Jason and I have ever met. So, uh, but I know just from talking to others, there's a lot of excitement about you being here. So we're really excited to have you here, man. So thank you
Awesome.
for joining me today.
Absolutely.
So we'll put a bow on this, man. So
Okay.
I like to end every episode with just some fun questions. I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
And it just gives our listeners a little bit of more insight into who you are, and it ends on a high note.
Awesome.
But there's just 5 questions I'll throw at you. So the
Okay.
first one: what is a quote or a song lyric or something from a movie, TV show, whatever, that you just like really resonates with you, and is just kind of something that really defines you or just sticks out? Maybe it's something that makes you laugh, whatever it is, right?
Gosh, that's good. Well, I am a big music fan. I go to Red Rocks in Colorado every year and see some shows. So when you said lyrics, that's the first thing that hit my mind. And oh my gosh, golly, hmm. that So my favorite band, you probably never heard of them, but they have a song. It's called "Climb to Safety."
Okay.
That's I always that resonates with me. Like, hey, try to make the choices that you can that are the safest, right? And that's what I try to live by, or whatever. If this is not always the best, but I mean, like, it's more about working towards doing the right thing. And so it's a lyric by a band called Widespread Panic, who
What a widespread panic.
well, I mean, if you see where I spend a lot of time,
Yeah, yeah.
that's where they're from.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, I saw them for the first time at a $2 in a bar in Athens, and me and three of my friends who all grew up together in Atlanta. We've been friends since elementary school. We get together every year and go to Red Rocks
Yeah,
in June for 3 days and go see them.
awesome, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
So,
cool. Okay, next question. So, what is a hidden talent?
gosh, you know, you know, I think it's my only talent, I think, is just my ability to. I think I'm able to put people at ease and connect. I try to always try to figure out a way to connect with somebody. You know, my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, several years ago, she gave me a nickname, and she said, "Your nickname is Taco." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, I love a good street taco. I mean, I could eat them every day." She was like, "No, it's because you taco to everybody." And I was like, "Huh?" But she's trying to say that, I don't have a problem having talking to people and treating them equally and making them feel comfortable. So I think that's, I always, when I have an initial consultation with a client or anybody, my first 10, 15 minutes, I'm not even thinking about the mortgage. I'm thinking about getting to know them. Tell me your story, and how we can connect. But anyway, so other than that, occasionally I can hit the golf ball okay.
Makes one of us.
But yeah, unfortunately my life is work and occasional golf and occasional vacation.
I hear you, man. So if you weren't a loan officer, what profession would you want to pursue?
Well, I told you I was, tried the criminal justice path early in my life. I don't think I would probably do that today. I would like to be some sort of, you know, counselor, maybe youth counselor, right? Or something in education, right?
Yeah, that's
I,
awesome.
you know,
Yeah.
I,
There's
I
there's
like to talk too much, so I like to.
there's a need for that for sure. Um, okay, is there a skill that you've always wanted to learn how to do, and if so, what's that?
I mean, I've always wanted to, you know, learn Spanish. I kick myself how bad I was in high school at it, and why didn't I pay attention a little more? And then in college, but it's one of those things that I told myself years. Oh, I'm gonna, do a course and pick it back up, and then the next year, and then it's gotten too far gone that I wish I would have done that. So that's one. Gosh, other skills. Maybe don't sweat the small stuff.
Okay.
I try to. There's that book, if you remember years ago. Don't sweat the small stuff. I try to tell myself, and I usually do an okay job at that. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's a
very good.
skill, but
Hey, it is. It is. And then last question. We live kind of in this age of nostalgia. We're seeing all these kind of like remakes of TV shows and movies and things like that. So,
oh yeah.
what is one? It could be anything. It could be a restaurant. It could be whatever. But what's something from your childhood that you wish would just make a comeback?
Wow. Wow. Gosh. And you said restaurant. There was this restaurant actually when I was a kid in Austin, Texas, called the Magic Time Machine.
Okay, yeah.
Did you ever encounter
They've got
that?
one here in Dallas now.
Oh, is it still
So
there? Okay. I just remember as a kid, that place was like, the most amazing thing ever, right?
all the costumed waiters, wait
I did,
staff, everybody's wearing different costumes,
right.
different characters. Yeah,
I didn't know they were still in existence. So, but, what else was there from my childhood that, maybe, you don't see an ice cream truck anymore. That was,
right.
always the highlight in the summer in the neighborhood, you know.
Yeah, just hear the music and go
Right,
in, go grab some
right.
quarters.
Yeah. But, like I said, I grew up in Atlanta. It was pretty metropolitan and pretty advanced where I was. But, yeah, I can't think of any restaurants that have gone away, actually. That's terrible.
That's all good, man. Well,
Anyways,
well, listen, I appreciate you joining us today. It's great hearing your story, and I think anyone who listened today probably learned a lot from you. And I appreciate you taking the time to join the lowdown. So, Jason,
absolutely.
thank you so much, and best of luck to you in the future. And I know you and I will be spending a lot of time together. So,
Absolutely. All
all
right,
right,
Connor. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
you got it. Thanks.